Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk a little bit about some of these numbers that Mr. Whalen just threw out, okay? So we know from the time that Miss Howington gets home from the park with her 2 kids, from the time 911 calls, just like Mr. Whalen said, it's about 11 minutes. And because of that surveillance video from the neighbor, we know what she was doing for a good amount of that time. So for one of those 11 minutes, she's either getting paid for window tinting or what we would submit to you is more likely a drug transaction. If you believe her statement that she came in for the very first time yesterday and sat on that stand, 3 of those minutes she was outside smoking, moving her car. And again, if you take her at her word for what she said on this stand yesterday, 4 of those minutes she waited to call 911 after seeing her child shot in the chest. Those were her words. Because she said that she walked up to that door, that glass door, she saw the flash of light, and she saw Gavin with the gun in his hand. And it is not until 4 minutes later that she places that call to 911. Let's talk about this 48 to 72 hours that the police should have given her after she finds out that her daughter's been killed. Ladies and gentlemen, they gave her an hour, and what did she do? She hid the murder weapon, and she trashed her phone. Imagine what she could have done with 48 to 72 hours. That's why she didn't get additional time. It wasn't because the police were out there trying to investigate this murder, and it had to be a murder, That's not what this was at all. The person that put murder in the police officer's minds was this defendant. She called 911 and said that somebody broke into her home and shot her 5-year-old daughter while she was laying on the couch in cold blood. Nobody put that in her head other than herself. This was the plan that she was concocting in those 4 minutes that she waited to call 911. And I want you to think about another thing. Mr. Whalen, he talked about the fact that Destiny probably died between 15 to 30 seconds based on what the medical examiner testified to. Go back and listen to that 911 call. When she gets back in the house after hiding the gun, as her daughter is probably taking what will be her last breaths alone because she is outside hiding her gun, think about what she said on that 911 call. She says she's still breathing. But again, Ms. Howington's not in there rendering aid. She can't be, based on her own statements. Think about what she said yesterday on the stand. Well, I was praying for her and saying her name, also while hiding the gun. Her daughter took her very last breaths while her mother was outside throwing the gun in a bush.
That is evidence not in the record.
This same instruction you will consider, ladies and gentlemen, what evidence is in the record and what is not. Final argument.
I also want to talk about the fact that Ms. Howington was apparently too distraught to talk to police after learning of her daughter's death. Okay? The defense keeps saying that she has PTSD, that there's no way, she wasn't in her right mind, right? So there's no way that anything that she said to these investigators after finding out that her daughter had died was accurate. And that's why she was kind of all over the place. Ladies and gentlemen, she had no problem, none whatsoever, being very clear in these text messages to both Callie and to Mr. Keys. She was very clear in these messages about the events. She had no problem telling them exactly where to go to her house and find that gun that she had just hid. She wasn't confused about that at all, was she? But you're supposed to believe that hours later she's too distraught to give an accurate story about how her daughter died? She's too distraught to even remember who all was in her home? Is that what you're supposed to believe? She can tell these people exactly where the gun is that she hid. She knows to go in a bathroom at UT Medical Center while her daughter's life lays in the balance and destroy her phone or try and give it away. She knows to do all that, but she can't possibly.
She couldn't have taken her last breath through the house and still be in her life in a balance at the hospital.
All right, this is final argument. You will judge what facts are within this record and what are not, ladies and gentlemen. Continue with your argument.
Again, she's too distraught to give accurate facts about what happened in the shooting, so she's not too distraught to do all these things to try and cover herself up, right? That's what you're supposed to believe. You're supposed to believe that she was protecting Gavin. That's why she did everything that she did. That's why she framed Destiny's father for murder, ladies and gentlemen. She did. Think about what she said up on that stand yesterday when I said that to her. I said, Miss Howington, you do realize that your statements alone could have caused Destiny's father to be arrested for first-degree murder. Her response to me, verbatim, was, Antoine didn't matter. Antoine had nothing to do with this case, but she had no problem framing him for murder, as long as it didn't look like she did anything wrong. That's all this has ever been about, ladies and gentlemen. And again, you have those videos. You get to go back in that deliberation room. You can watch them as many times as you want. You find the place in there where she tells the investigators that she hid that gun to protect her son. Because I assure you, it's not in there. What she says is, I was scared I would get in trouble. I didn't want to be arrested for having a gun. Her. Not little 2-year-old Gavin. Her. That is the only person that this defendant has ever been worried about throughout the pendency, the 5 years that this case has been pending. She is only worried about herself. That is clear from the evidence in this case. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, there are some things that neither side is ever going to agree on, but the one thing that I will agree on is, yes, we are not standing up here in front of you and saying that Robin Howington took her gun and shot her daughter in cold blood, because we can't say that, okay? There are 3 people that know what happened in that house on September the 14th, 2019. One of them is 5-year-old Destiny. We all know that she can't come into this courtroom and tell you what happened to her. The other one was 2 years old at the time. And because he was 2 years old, when they tried to talk to him, what did he do? Rolled around the floor, drew a waterfall, drew a dog. He couldn't tell you what happened. He can't come in here in this courtroom and defend himself against his mother's allegations because he was 2 years old. The third person that knows exactly what happened in that house that night is that woman sitting right over there. And instead of being honest, instead of being truthful when it came to who took the life of her 5-year-old child, she took every single opportunity in the world to lie and lie and lie.
Judge, I hate to object, but
She can't say that Gavin can't come into the courtroom and defend himself against the accusation. That's their theory.
It's final argument. It's final argument.
Again, the only person who can really tell us what happened is that woman over there, and she has done nothing but lie since this thing started. Even up until she took that stand yesterday, that was the very first time that she has ever told that version of events. Very first time. 5 years this case has been pending. That's the first time when she took that stand in front of you all. That's the first time you've ever heard this version. She has played the victim in this whole thing. She has. She has been more worried about herself than anything else. That is evident. Ladies and gentlemen, I will not stand up here and tell you that there is a right way to react whenever you lose your child, because every single person is going to react different. But what I will say is that there's a wrong way to do it. It's exactly what she did. You don't see your child get shot and immediately think to hide the weapon that killed her. That is not reasonable, ladies and gentlemen. That is not what happens in accidents. If she was truly trying to protect Gavin, why have other people try and come and get this gun? Why? There is no reason for that. There's absolutely no logical explanation, no reasonable explanation for her actions from September 14th of 2019 till she took that stand yesterday. There's just nothing she can do to explain that away. No matter how many stories she tells, that does not add up. So yeah, I will agree with Mr. Whalen. There's not a right way to act whenever you lose a child. But there is a completely wrong way. And it's everything that she did. Again, I go back to, we keep hearing that she was too distraught to be talked to during that time. If she would have been a little bit more honest and upfront, she probably wouldn't have been in that room for four hours. If she wouldn't have changed her story every 10 minutes, every time she was confronted with a new piece of evidence, she wouldn't have had to be in that room for 4 hours. If she wouldn't have lied and said that she saw her son take a bar stool, put it up to her closet, she wouldn't have had to go back to her house so that they could measure that. She brought all of the investigator's actions upon herself, and we want to keep talking about how Investigator Riddle yelled at her. He was frustrated, ladies and gentlemen, again, based on the information that she has given them. They think that there is a suspect at large out there shooting 5-year-olds. How frustrating must that be? I'll tell you how frustrating it is. Investigator Riddle was frustrated. He admitted that on the stand. There is nothing wrong with the way he acted based on her actions of destroying her phone in the hospital while her daughter is being tended to. She's more worried about destroying her phone? Of course he's frustrated. That's what makes him a good investigator. And then we want to talk about how Investigator Wardlaw hugged the defendant. Well, the defense can't have it both ways. Okay? They can't say that the officers are overbearing and intimidating and then in the same breath fault them for trying to console her when she's crying. They can't have it both ways, ladies and gentlemen. The defense wants to focus on what these officers did instead of looking at the evidence against Miss Howington. These officers were doing their job, and they had to do extra work because of what she did, not because of anything that they did. I also want to talk about something that Mr. Whalen said about that Miss Howington had to know that the gun was in an unsafe place. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not what neglect is, okay? That is not what we have to show. But I would submit to you that based on her own statements, she absolutely should have known that that gun was in an unsafe place. If we want to take Miss Howington at her word, that she took this stand, she raised her hand, she took an oath to tell the truth. Maybe she did this time. So let's just assume she did. Even if we take every single word that she said yesterday, that's true. That is the definition of neglect. Think about it. Callie supposedly gets this gun, puts it back together, and she says, okay, go put it up. She doesn't ask him where he put it. She doesn't check to make sure he put it in a safe place. She just doesn't care. She goes about her business for 2 days. She is responsible for her own children in her own home. If she wants to take on having a gun in her home where her 2 children are, it is her responsibility and nobody else's. It is not Callie's. It is not anyone's. It is her gun in her home with her kids. Nobody else's. And she admitted that. She admitted that to Investigator Wardlaw the night of the shooting. He said, don't you think that it's your responsibility to make sure that your gun is kept in a safe place? Yes. She agreed then. It is her responsibility, ladies and gentlemen. She had a duty to her 2 small children to make sure that they were protected, to make sure that they were safe. and she failed miserably at it. In the 3 minutes that she now claims she was outside smoking, she says that this 2-year-old got this gun that she apparently has no idea where it is in her house. Y'all saw the pictures of little Gavin. He's not very tall. It had to be somewhere pretty accessible. She didn't testify that when she walked in that there were stools pushed everywhere for him climbing this time. No, this time she didn't say that. She agreed with me that had to be pretty accessible to him. 3 minutes. That's all it took. She was outside smoking, according to her own statement. And her 5-year-old daughter lost her life. And that's on her, ladies and gentlemen. That's not on Gavin, that's on their mother, Robin Howington. That's why she's on trial today. Not because the state or the investigators want to turn an accident into a murder. It's not why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. We are here because of one person's actions and one person only. And it's that woman sitting right there at that table. This is a tragedy. A 5-year-old girl lost her life. It is. It is an absolute tragedy. I will not stand up here before you and say that it is not. But it could have been prevented. It should have been prevented by the one person who had the duty and the responsibility to do so. And like I said, failed miserably at it. For all those reasons, ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you deliver a verdict that comports with the evidence in this case. The only verdict that supports the evidence is guilty as charged. Thank you all very much for your time and attention.
All right, thank you.